last week, 143 times last week during Congress, the word Civil War was mentioned by both Democrats and Republicans in Congress. So I'm not the one pushing Civil War, okay? I know some folks do not like some of the comments I make about guns and things. And when government starts saying, well, hey, turn them in, you can do what you want to do, but I'm not going to do it. I can show you statistically, historically, some things that have happened. And so, although not everybody's upset with me, and let me just explain something, I do get emails and phone calls, and people sit down and say, you know, Pastor, this subject matter really shouldn't be addressed. I'd like to know why. And that's my question. H.R. 5, that bill, relieves us of all of our religious liberties. It removes the Religious Liberties Act from American history. It's gone. Which means you can't say anything you don't want to say. Or you can't come against certain things. Anybody here believe that no boy should be working on a girls' swim team and competing as a girl, although he's a guy? Anybody like the fact that, you know, any guy can now join a girls' cross-country team and win and set records and he's not a girl? Matter of fact, if you do any surveys online today, it says, what do you identify as? I don't identify as anything. I'm a man, period. Always have been. Always will be. Did you guys know that 90% of people that have a sex change want to turn back? 90%. And that comes from Johns Hopkins University, which does 100% of the surgeries, gender relocation surgeries in this country. 90% of folks that do that want to go back after they become what they're not. That's the world in which we live. That's the world in which we're doing church. We're no longer in Jerusalem. We're actually doing church in Babylon today. And some of these things that are uncomfortable to talk about and deal with and address, we in the church have to deal with them. We have to. We can't just say, well, some other time, you know, somebody else can deal with that. We have to deal with it today. Here's what it looks like in today's world. Sam Rutherford was in the 1600s, made some statements about civil disobedience. He wrote a book called Rex Lex. And he doesn't propose armed revolution as an automatic solution. In other words, if things get really bad, we don't just say, okay, arm up, let's go burn the Capitol House down and things like that. But he does suggest 3 levels of resistance for an individual. First of all, defend yourself by protest. I have sent already this year over 14,000 emails. Some of those are copied and pasted. I've sent to every member of Congress, every member of Senate. Typically every week I'm sending something to the White House. I'm sending something to Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell's office, the leadership in the Democratic House. I've already sent an email to Governor Boshier saying, I didn't vote for you, but you're my governor. You'll have my support as long as you don't step on the values that I have. Is that fair? It's the right thing to do. I didn't threaten him. I didn't say, you're not my governor. But yet we live in a world that does that. So, an email can be a protest. You realize that? I sent an email to Jerry Comer that said, if and when H.R. 5 passes, I refuse to obey it. I will not comply. I just told our House of Representative that I am not going to let a man go in the women's bathroom. In other words, I told him I will defy a federal law. Is that okay to do? Sure it is. Based on my convictions. So in other words, that email was a protest saying, I don't like this, I don't agree with this, I don't support this. Okay, and there's more issues than that at stake. Then he says, you have to flee if at all possible. When they left England to come here, where else was there to go? Where would we go today if religious persecution got so great in this country? Where would we go? How about Mexico? Where they just slaughtered some Mormons mercilessly. Canada, anybody? Puerto Rico? Jamaica? Haiti, right? Cuba? Where would we go? Venezuela? So really there's no place for us to go in that regards. But third, Rutherford says we can use force if necessary to protect ourselves. Now there's a difference between what happened in Rome with the people being thrown to lions. They basically said, if you do not bow down to Caesar, that's not religious stuff, that's not spiritual, that is political. Do you know there were also Christians that kind of backed out of that and said, hey, I don't really believe in Christ and I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Rome records about 157 people that said that. Rome also records about 120,000 people that were thrown to the lions because they would not deny Christ. Am I saying this is going to happen this year, this next year? Am I saying civil war is going to happen? I'm not saying those things at all. But I'm saying we better be watching the laws that are being pushed, the government's structures and what they're doing and how they're pushing things on us, and the fact that you have to pass the bill before you know what's in the bill. How that got passed, I don't know. What's next? How many of you feel that Congress, our Congress right now, is serving the American citizen?
No.
Anybody here? Can you name one bill Congress has passed this year? Last 2 years. 3. See a pattern? So these are things we got to look at ourselves. When things involve government or corporate or a larger group, leaves two options: protest, then force, employ, or second defense. In other words, we can protest, we can write letters, we can make phone calls, we can send emails, and then we have to work ourselves into a place of self-defense. And there may come a time when this happens. Maybe sooner than we know. Bob Dylan wrote the song, When You Gonna Wake Up? Anybody remember when that song came out? Let me see your hands. There should be a whole lot more hands in the air. It goes like this: adulterers in churches, pornography in the schools. You got gangsters in power and lawbreakers making rules. Man, when you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up? When you gonna wake up? My dad was not a Bob Dylan fan. But I would hear my dad singing this, and I'd think, what is he singing? Gangsters in power? I remember saying, Dad, what's a gangster in power? He says, everybody in Congress. He wasn't happy in the 70s. And then straight to the things that remain. Now, there's a whole lot said there. And what I appreciate about the fact was Bob Dylan had a relation. He had a salvation experience with Jesus. Changed a lot of the things he was doing and singing, and that stuff came out. Only difference in the centuries is the language used and how but it speaks the same, doesn't it? I mean, that typically shows you what's happening in the world today and in the church world today. We must be at the appropriate level at this point in history. That's what we're going to talk about as we look at this situation here. Daniel chapter 3, 8 through 18, it says this: For this reason, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and brought charges against the Jews. They were supposed to bow down, they wouldn't do it. They responded and said to the king, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the lyre, the trombone, the psaltery, and the bagpipe, all kinds of music, is to fall down and worship the golden image. But whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast in the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the administration of the provinces of Babylon, namely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O God, have disregarded you, and they do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage, this always gets me. He gets mad because people won't bow down and worship something he made with his own hands, or ordered to be made. That's a big picture of government right there. He gave orders to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and these men were brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up?" Now, if you're ready, at the moment you hear the sounds of the horn, the flute, the golden, the trombone, the psaltery, the bagpipe, all kinds of music, fall down and worship. I've made the image I've made very well, but if you do not worship, you will immediately be cast in the midst of a furnace of blazing fire. And what God is there who can deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego panicked, got down on their knees, wet their pants, and got scared to death. Does it say that? No. Replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter, because you're not God. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire. And he will deliver us out of your hand, O God. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we're not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Listen to the reality right here. The reality is this. The protest. This was a protest. This was a non-compliant. This was, we're not going to bow to any gods you make. We're not going to bow to you. And basically it was violence. They knew by saying we're not going to bow, they were going to die in that regards. It was their refusal to stand and bow. It was their stand for God in direct opposition to the king who wanted their worship to begin with. This is the king of Babylon, who has known these three men. They're in power. He knows these three men because of their connection to Daniel, who interpreted a dream that he had about an image. And yet, here he stands, asking them to bow. They risked life and limb while being a part of the leadership team in Babylon. So he has to get these guys down. He has to make these guys comply. He has to make somebody an example in that regards. And in a fallen world, there's always going to be force. Name for me any government this year that hasn't used force in some way to make sure its citizens obey and comply. Name me one government, anybody, that has not used force. Take out every nation with a military. Take out every nation with a prison or a jail. When you see the red lights behind you, what do? You pull over, right? Why not just take off faster? Because by force, they could take you where they want to take you in that regards. Every existing government must use force to exist. Here's what we got to understand. Every government uses force to exist. Name me one that doesn't. Can you name one government that doesn't use force to exist? I'm waiting. Do we use force to exist? Kuwait sure is glad we did. France and England sure were glad we did during World War II. Ask Italy about it too. Or Germany. Or those nations. All these things are there. Has to be legitimate need for and the use of force in question. So even among governments, when we talk about these things, we've got to realize force is something going on around us every single day. It's nothing new. Any and every reaction that crosses the line from force to violence must only be crossed out of absolute necessity. At what point will you and I, or the church as a whole, have to step out and be violent because of what's happening against us? What happens when soldiers or officers of the law are told to come to your house and arrest you because you're part of an underground church? What happens because of your faith when they slap a gold star on your chest until you get on the train cars? one man convince an entire nation that one people group was the problem and the reason for all their problems? How does one man do that? How will one man convince all the nations that if they get behind his system, he'll put out a plan and a mark that no one can buy or sell without, and the world will just jump right into his lap? See, that's the kind of things we're talking about dealing with. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego made their own line with no thoughts to it. We're not going to bow. We're not going to bow. They were basically saying that to the king who appointed them as leaders in Babylon. And at some point in the church in America, we're going to have to say we're not going to do that. We're not going to honor that law. We're not going to obey that law. We're not going to do it, period. So what happens, and this had nothing to do with the new governor, but what happens, let's say next year, when a law is passed that anybody can walk in any bathroom in your school that they want to walk into? Who should be the first people to complain about that? I would hope it would be the church. I don't care how other people say they're enlightened and all this and all that. Target. 3 years ago, made a policy. All bathrooms are open, right? 5,713 assaults. 5,713 assaults have happened in Target bathrooms in this country. Do you hear that in the news? 5,713. This is being videotaped, put on YouTube and our channel. You can check it out. 5,713 sexual assaults in bathrooms by people who shouldn't have been in that bathroom to begin with.
Amen.
But do you hear that in the news? No. Should you not hear those things in the news? If that's going on, but yet they don't. So what's our line? What is our line? What is your line? Your line as an individual may be different than the church. But I'm telling you, there are lines we better start drawing and figuring out what we're going to do with it, because it's getting there closer to us all the time. Right now in history, protest for us is the best. And that means sending emails, phone calls, letting your elected officials know what's going on. And I had the list I was going to put out there, and I realized new governor, I'm going to get all the information updated, but you need to write letters to the editor, you need to call somebody, you need to text somebody, you need to send emails and letters. And look, don't depend on somebody else to do that. You may say, well, you may be here and say, well, I don't agree with you. That's okay. Write your congressman, your senator, and tell them how you feel and what you like and what you don't like, okay? It works that way for everybody. But you need to make your voice known and voice heard. Pilgrims had a place to flee, but where would we go today? I don't plan on leaving the country. Got a pretty good thing here, I think. We have democracy. It's not perfect. We have government. It's not perfect. We have freedoms that every other nation does not have. But yet we've got to fight for it and support it. We kind of use that word reformation in the same vein as revolution. When they left England to come here, they left because their religious liberties were being squashed. They left because bills and taxes and all sorts of other things were being pushed upon them. And they said, we're not going to take it. We're not going to in the early 80s, there was a band called Twisted Sister. Maybe that's where the transgender stuff came from. If you ever saw that guy, he looked strange. Dee Snider, I think was his name. We're not going to take it. We're not going to take it. We're not going to take it anymore. The whole ideas of those things going on. At what point are you going to say to yourself, I can't do this anymore? And not run and not flee, but say, I'm drawing my line. I'm not moving from this position. When are you going to do that? What's it going to take to get you there? When we protest the government, we're asking them to limit their authority and to step back from their expectations and their demands. So when I sent a letter to Jerry Comer and I said, hey, I can't support this, he said, I don't either. Thank goodness. The response I got from Nancy Pelosi's office were not as, basically, thank you for your opinion, I appreciate it. No, you don't. She signed off on it. One of 253 people that signed off on that bill. And look, if you've not read the entire H.R. 5 bill, shame on you. I've been talking about it, preaching it. I put it out there. I posted it. It's 173 pages you need to read because it's going to impact your life and your kids and your grandkids and this country. Please know what's in that bill. So when someone says, well, what's in it? Don't say, well, I don't know, but my pastor doesn't like it. Not good enough. You're responsible for what you need to know about. You're also responsible for what you don't know, and ignorance isn't bliss, ignorance is stupidity. There's a time for force. A lot of times in our country, if we're not careful, we realize that. There's one area especially I want to talk about today, and that is the pro-life movement. Because nobody else is supporting infants in the womb. In Newark, New Jersey, right now, you can go into a clinic, give birth to a child, and walk away, and they have the right to let it just starve to death and die on the table. That isn't just barbaric, that's satanic. That is demonic. How did Roe v. Wade evolve to that? We should aggressively support a human life bill or a constitutional amendment protecting the unborn. And the church has to be involved. Has to be involved. My opinion. This is my opinion. This has nothing to do with votes for governors or presidents or anybody else. I've talked to enough women in my office who have had abortions in the past, who still have nightmares. I know I have talked to people who were sterilized because they had an abortion and can never have kids again. I've talked to people who had abortions and have had nightmares and nightmares and nightmares, who had trouble having babies after having abortions. I've not heard one good abortion story in my office. I probably got 100 of them. I understand that some people will say, well, it's convenient and this and that. I cannot biblically support abortion for any reason. Well, Pastor Dan, what if somebody gets raped? I went to college with a baby who was an adult who had been the victim of his mother being raped. He's standing in a pulpit somewhere in Indiana today because his mom chose to have him. Even though she was raped by somebody very, very out of his mind on drugs, of a different race, physical issues and differences, she got raped. The church just treated her like dirt. Like she must have done something. She got raped on the way home from work behind a gas station. When she was picked by this guy, she was pumping gas, guy grabs her, takes her behind the building, rapes her, leaves her out there. The church treated her like dirt. The church is good at treating people wrong a lot. You know what? That mother said, you know what, this is awful. The guy got off in court, no problems, no issues, just let him go. She could have said, I don't want this. She could have had an abortion and easily got rid of the whole thing. Chose to have the baby. He's in ministry today. I can tell you about 5 or 6 other people that I know who were rape babies. Tell you about people who were told, your baby's going to have we've seen from the X-rays, your baby's going to have a debilitating disease, and you just need to not have to worry about that problem, that issue. The first Sunday of December, we're going to have a service that focuses on special needs. Write it down, mark it down. If you know someone who has a special needs child or an adult who's a special needs person, bring them. Because a lot of folks just say, let's just get rid of it. Convenience. Think about this. Birth is now about convenience if we're not careful. people who said, you know what, I don't care what's wrong in the womb with this child, I'm going to have it. And sometimes all those things the doctor said were going to happen and were part of that baby's life were not. And other times they soundly were. But our culture says, just kill it, just get rid of it. You know, in California, if you destroy a condor egg, $500,000 fine. Is it a condor yet? $500,000 fine for destroying a condor egg. But they say it's just tissue in that woman's womb, so get rid of it. That's where the country is messed up and wrong, and why we've got to do something when it comes to abortion. I'm okay with overturning Roe v. Wade. God can't honor. Look, 1,712 babies will be aborted daily in this country. Every single day in America. Most of those, 80% of those take place in 5 cities in this country. You want to guess the kind of leadership they have there? I believe we should do those things. Church, right now, we're the only voice for the unborn in the country. I told the story out, but I'll tell it again. Jennifer and I, when we had Hannah, Jennifer began to have some real serious issues with preeclampsia. Our doctor, who was a Christian, said, by law, I have to tell you this. You know, there's probably a good chance you should probably terminate, if you need to, you might want to terminate the pregnancy because it's going to alleviate some of the issues. We had Hannah, she's perfect, she talks a lot. Kid never talked till she was 4 years old. Jennifer's still here, Hannah's still here. She did what she had to do medically because what the law told her to do. So I've been in a place as a parent when a doctor says, look, this condition with high blood pressure could cause the death of your wife or your child in childbirth. That's not like the card up my sleeve. I'm just saying, we've been there. I know other parents who have been there. Baby survived, the parent survived. Anybody want to guess the actual number of people that died last year in this country giving birth? Three. 3 people died giving birth. And let's go even further with this. Medical investigation revealed it wasn't the birth process that killed the people. It's hospital personnel. All the stuff I'm telling you can be researched and found online. And look, you can find, for everything I tell you, you can find 5,000 opposite things. Just check your news and make sure what you're looking at, but those things are out there. I think legal action should be taken against hospitals and clinics and doctors that perform abortions. Pastor Dana, that's just awful. Principle in the Word of God is choose life. Right? Choose life. Now, am I telling you to go firebomb these clinics and shoot these abortion doctors? No. Not at all. You know, you can email, you can write these clinics and these doctors, and you can be Christ-like in your response. You can tell them why you don't support abortion. You can even protest. Yeah, but the protest, you have to get dressed up, you have to go to Louisville, you have to do this, you have to do all that. Look, folks, if we can't stand up for the unborn babies that don't have a voice, what are we doing? Here's the reality. The state should feel the presence of the body of Christ. Anytime we protest, anything we say, hey, we don't like this, we can't just do it with the fists and yelling and screaming. We have to make sure they understand the principles behind why we feel the way that we feel. If we don't say anything, nobody else will say anything either. And right now, the church, is the only organization in this country standing up for the rights of the unborn. And with a country that kills legally 1,700 babies every single day, all the way up now to the birth process. I don't know how we haven't seen more crazy things here. We have to understand there are times, absolutely, when we should stand up and defy the state. There are times, absolutely, we should stand up and deny the federal government. Brings up some issues, though. That's what we're going to look at. We have to understand we're not talking about turning this country into a theocracy. We're not going to change the government. Our intent and our goal would be to change the way the government thinks about life and issues and problems that concern the church in that regards. Even though we have a Christian consensus, our family, we can't wrap the flag around Christian issues. My allegiance is to something higher than the United States flag. And one hangs outside my house. And I grew up learning every flag fact and knowing every holiday. My dad was a flag man. My dad was a military. My dad taught me to love this country, and I do, and you folks know that. But I have a higher allegiance than to this country. That's Almighty God. And the word that He gave us to understand is the principle for how we live. We also have to understand that what we do here as Christians will speak to other nations. What would have happened if we had not gotten involved in World War II? How many more years would there have been Jews in Holocaust camps if we hadn't gotten involved? If the Japanese hadn't bombed Pearl Harbor, we probably wouldn't have gotten involved for a few more, at least a lot longer than that. So we have to do something. We also have to understand that standing up against the state will bring opposition, and we do not know how they might respond against us. Joy Bauer made the statement on The View a couple weeks ago. They had a candidate on there from Wisconsin, and she made the statement to the people there, why don't you just get elected? Tell people you're not going to take their guns, get elected, and then take their guns after you get elected. In other words, why don't you lie to people? A media person was suggesting that they lie to Americans and then take their guns anywhere. That's how you get shot. That's the world in which we live. So when we start saying we're not going to give you our guns, we're not going to back down from this, we're going to protest, what's going to happen, we don't know. But we don't understand exactly how harsh it will be when it comes back against us, but we know this, it could be harsh. Here's the other thing. Always going to be weird people out there. Pentecostal churches attract the weirdest people. I'm not talking just about you folks. I'm talking about weird people. Crazy ideas, crazy theology, all sorts of things. Just the stuff that you don't know. But in a fallen world, we should expect that. But here's the real deal today. Here's what it says in the Declaration. The right of the people to alter and abolish it and institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles, organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. We have been given a right in the Declaration of the Constitution that says, when it gets bad, you can change it. How many knew that was there? On my desk in my office, I've got a copy of the Declaration and the Constitution. And when I see laws and things that are changing and shifting in America, I highlight those things in yellow. And let me tell you what, there's a lot of yellow in my Constitution now. Things are changing, things are shifting, laws are changing. They also said you can't change it or abolish it just for light or transient causes. They can't say, just because you don't like something doesn't mean you can change the Constitution. 140 143 references last week to Civil War. Since the beginning of this year, January 1st, the word illegitimate in regards to election has been used 7,000 times on the House floor. $7,000 times. Specifically by one party. About an election. Proposition 208, California, 5 or 6 years ago, voters said we do not want abortion. Federal judge said we don't care what the voter wants, you're going to get it anyway. I wonder why California's burning like crazy right now? When there's a long train of abuses and usurpations, it is their right of the people's, it is their duty to throw off such government. In other words, the Constitution declares to us that we have the right to question, we have the right to protest, we have the right to gather, we have the right to say, we don't like that. Now, a lot of times it comes down to this. If you're aware that a bill is about to be passed, and Congress is especially good about not letting those things get out there, it's still your right to check congressional guidelines and websites. What they're going to be talking about in passing. What bills are up for adoption. What bills are up to be passed. You have a right and responsibility to know what your government is doing. Don't just sit back and say, well, they leave me alone. As long as they leave me alone, that's fine. No, it's not. And as believers and Christians, we have a responsibility to know what our government is doing. Am I right? A lot of times we talk, oh man, the tax rate's crazy. Did you go to the county meeting where they set the county tax rates? I won't ask who went. How many things do we complain about, but we didn't go to talk to somebody? And for that, I do applaud the teachers in this state who went to the State House. Why? Because they did their civil duty and said, we don't like this, and here we are. And they showed up in force. I applaud people who will do that. Whether I support what they're doing or not. We the people is where we are. So we got to use caution, we got to use our heads, we got to have common sense. We don't just do stupid things. But I'm telling you what, church, if you're not praying for your government, if you're not watching them, if you're not making sure what your people are doing, get on every email account you can from your representatives so that you're hearing what they're doing and what they're supporting. Every time Hoover or somebody comes to our area, or Max Lynn, whoever, Max Wise, every time they come, try to get out there and hear what they're saying and share your concerns with them and talk to them. Because these people represent you. Personally, I'm tired of elected officials who are only worried about getting reelected. I'd rather have somebody say, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C. for 4 years and that's it. And all I'm going to fight for is this one thing. That guy's got my vote. Instead of, well, I got to do this and I got to do that and pass things down the chain so I can get reelected. Anybody know what the average length of time of those in Congress right now is? 42 years. So all the people complaining about the president now have been in office for 38 years. You know where I'm going with this, right? See, at some point, you stop blaming the person before you. I've been your pastor for 9 years. Guess what? The problems now are mine, not somebody else's. Right? We're long past saying, well, that former pastor before. No, wait. I'm here now. Been here 9 years now. So at what point do I have to start taking responsibility for what's going on? You know what I'm saying? Same thing in life. Same thing where you work. Folks, get involved. Email your congressman. Get to know what they're supporting. Keep in line with what's happening in government. Know what's happening with, contact the future governor of this state as of right now. Let him know that you're going to be praying for him and encouraging him and supporting him, that he's your governor. But let him know what your standards are. If you know the things he ran on, say, here are the things that concern me, what you've said and what you've done, and so here's where I got to draw the line. And draw your line. But let somebody know what your line is, and let somebody know you drew the line. And then pray for those folks. Don't stick your head in the sand and say, well, somebody else can take care of that, and somebody else can. Look, you are we the people. And we the people have responsibility. We do. Lord, help us today to get involved, to use our mouths and our voices and our convictions to make a difference in our country. God, we can't blame Congress and Washington, D.C. and the State House for all the problems when we have a voice and we've not used it. So God, help us today, especially to stand up for the rights of the unborn and to make a difference in our world, we pray. In Jesus' name.